Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst or whiskey with an analyst while organizing a spreadsheet, linking crime events, uncovering patterns, identifying a series, and getting the latest updates on associations, training, and technology. So have a good walk, drive safely, or enjoy your run while joining us as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
How are you doing, analysts? Jason Elder here with another LEA podcast deep dive. Today we have Research Remix, and with me, as always, is Jamie Roush. Jamie, how are we doing?
Doing great, Jason. Thanks for having me back. So excited to be
Yes,
here.
I am always willing to talk research with you, and actually any topic, to be honest with you. But how's your summer going?
It is wonderful, trying to stay a little bit busy and trying to also have a little bit of a vacation and enjoy this wonderful summer. So it's been great.
Yeah, it's wonderful hot summer, right?
Yeah, it is
Man,
definitely that.
right?
The place.
Yep, in 6 months we'll be complaining that it's too cold.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, what are we talking today?
Today we're going to talk a little bit about what motivates police to be proactive and evidence-based. And this is going to be based on a study that was done in 2025 by Peterson and and Koper. And it really is this idea behind what really motivates people to want to do proactive work. And as we know, there's decades of research in showing that evidence-based and proactive policing, whether it's hotspots or problem solving or focused deterrence, not only improves legitimacy and public trust, but also really reduces crime, right? So the problem is that departments continue to struggle to create this systematic way of employing techniques and remaining focused on traditional enforcement efforts, right? The traffic stops, the pedestrian stops, that traditional approach. And so this particular study took an approach of surveying patrol officers from a large suburban police department in the Northeast. Again, one region of the country, so it might be interesting to see what happens in other regions. But they wanted to learn more about what motivates officers, and particularly around this idea of, so the general kind of design of this was some pretty key questions, like how often are they engaged in proactive policing, what their comfort level was with it, and what they knew about proactive policing and evidence-based policing. Obviously, whether they believe that their organization, not only the agency as a whole, but also their direct supervisors expected proactive work or even bought into proactive work or believed in that as well. And then also the last component, which is whether they felt like they were prepared to do this type of work. Did they have all of the resources and tools that were necessary to be proactive and to go out and to do this type of approach? So they had some key takeaways and findings. The first finding of this particular one was that the number one thing that kind of sat behind officers and whether they wanted to drive and do proactive policing was organizational factors. That was the strongest driver. And really it was around those questions of if the agency kind of expected proactive policing, supervisors set clear expectations about what they were supposed to do, and then ultimately were they prepared to handle a bunch of different types of proactivity, not just hotspots or not just focused deterrence, but all of the different ones. As part of that result, they found that reward really mattered. And this is something that I see in a lot of agencies, not only on the sworn side of things, but also on professional staff, right? Being recognized and rewarded is something that drives you to do this type of work, even if it's not something you're comfortable with, that there's some sort of reward or benefit on the other side of it. The second result was that traditional proactive activities of traffic stops, arrests were the most common kind of engagement activities for officers. People were used to doing things like that. They were less likely to do community engagement, hotspots, patrol approaches, public trust, community engagement, crime prevention were less often used, right? So when they thought about proactivity, they thought primarily of traditional proactive approaches, not the evidence-based ones, right? But in this finding, they found that if agencies prepared their officers with these different options, gave them examples of where to employ these different options, and provided them a lot of kind of support in these different ways, community engagement, crime prevention, that they were likely to do it as well. So that result says, hey, most agencies really are doing these traditional approaches, but if the agency prepares them well around evidence-based approaches, they're likely to start doing them as well. The finding 3 of this one was probably the one that I think most people would think about, and that there are individual factors at the individual officer level that drive whether or not they want to do proactive work and whether they employ evidence-based approaches. And it was basically the officers who felt most comfortable with proactive work. So they had previous experience doing deployments in hotspots, or they had previous experience doing community engagement meetings, or they had some sort of previous experience doing crime prevention, that they were comfortable enough to say, yeah, I can totally do this. And the other part of those individual factors were people who said that they were doing this work to be motivated by promotion, right? They knew that if the agency wanted this to happen, that they were likely to get promoted or to get looked at by doing what the agency wanted them to do. So that was like that individual driver that went through it as well. The fourth kind of result of this was around supervisor leadership, and that was like direct supervision. When supervisors were expecting proactive work and following up on proactive work and making sure that officers were accountable to doing that proactive work, it got done, right? We often say in this business, what gets measured is what gets done. This is a great example of that. As part of this particular result, though, they also found that female officers had a higher level of non-traditional proactivity. So they were more likely to engage in community engagement, crime prevention, other evidence-based approaches than male officers. It wasn't a statistically significant outcome, but it was a unique kind of caveat to that approach as well. And then finally, although this was not statistically significant, they also found that there are some external factors to whether officers want to do proactivity and evidence-based, and it's primarily driven from the community. So if the community expects it, they will often do it. Again, it wasn't statistically significant. So overall, really what the main kind of part of this is that the organizational structures and the organization preparing officers, saying that they want it, setting clear expectations, measuring it, and providing accountability is often what drove whether officers actually did the work. And so it was the idea of kind of aligning the systems of the organization, aligning supervisors around this desire to do it, and then obviously training people and providing a reward to them, right? Which I think we hear about a lot of other kind of initiatives there as well.
My reaction is it sounds pretty obvious to me that those having a certain culture at the police department are going to be more likely to have proactive policing. That culture can be within the police department and within the community, feeding that culture and police-like routine. So if it's going to be part of their routine, you talked about the follow-up with leadership, the expectation. I think it eventually gets there, but if you have a situation where you have lots of turnover or rotation, or you have something where if the officers are like, I'm just going to wait this out because we're not going to be sticking with it very long. And it might be a bad attitude, but people will do that if they think that's like, hey, this isn't something that we feel is long lasting. They're not going to be as engaged and not going to follow it as much, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I think one of the things that this really talks about is the fact that if you're an organization that wants to do this, you have to foster a culture that is supportive of this, right? And if that is not part of your culture, you have to work through the change management to move your department in that direction towards that culture that support all of this, right? We often say in the profession that culture drives policing behavior, and we know that it does. I think this research is absolutely saying, in fact, culture in this particular case is something that drives it. And it is interesting that reward is a part of this, right? Because that is a cultural element. Right? A lot of officers do great work and they will stop doing great work when they're not rewarded and when they don't get the support of their organization. And it works both ways.
Yeah. I think along with the reward too is, and this gets into the individual factors, is I think officers just like to do it. They're comfortable in that situation. It sounds like they have the charisma to not be intimidated, to go talk to just about anybody in their community about anything. From the factors that you listed there about just being communication and the expectation being set, I can see those people who just naturally maybe have the gift for gab or just are really comfortable talking to just about anything really embrace proactive policing. Whereas in the exact opposite of that, if it's something that you're not comfortable with, it's not something that you're going to go out and do. And my final point to that is analysts are the same way, right? The analysts that are maybe have the gift of gab and really enjoy talking to the community, they're going to seek out those opportunities, whereas analysts that aren't as comfortable there, they're not going to seek out those opportunities.
Yeah, and I think it also talks about direct supervision in law enforcement, knowing your people and knowing what they're comfortable doing, and then also developing them in a way to give them the reps in these other areas that you
Mm-hmm.
think might broaden their perspective. And I say the same thing for analyst supervisors, right? We
Mm-hmm.
often see analyst supervisors putting an analyst in a particular unit or a particular geographic area and leaving them there for a long time. And that's great. They develop a lot of relationships and things like that, but they don't get reps in other things, right? And so their sphere of knowledge is constrained by the areas that they're working and the people that they're working with. And so it's also important for analyst supervisors to look at that professional development of your employees and say, God, what do they not have, right? I was working with an analyst recently who had always spent their entire career in investigations. And so when you get into talking about patterns and trends and hotspots, and you talk about geographic areas and characteristics and situational crime prevention, they're very weak in that area, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I said, we're not going to take you out of this investigative unit or this type of work, but maybe let's give you a project where you have to focus in a little bit more around a place or more around kind of
Mm-hmm.
that geographic approach so that you do have a little bit of balance, or get out with officers more frequently and see what's happening at that patrol level or that operations level, just to have a little bit more of those reps in terms of becoming broad in your career. But then also, how do you help your organization being in that, or if you're moving to another organization in the future?
Yeah. Here's another thought in terms of support. Just some, and this isn't just necessarily police officers. I've seen lots of people in all walks of life do this. If they try something new and they get their hand slapped or they get scolded, that's going to have an impact on them. And so I do feel that the idea of having that department and leadership support, it is really big, and giving them an opportunity to maybe make mistakes and to learn from, and not just come down on them so hard for trying something new.
But I think that's absolutely applicable to analysts, right? Analysts have
Yeah.
to be able to try different techniques in different ways. They have to be able to develop an analytical product, hand it to the decision maker, and have the decision maker say, hey, this isn't going to work because of X, Y, and Z,
Mhm.
but don't stop doing what you're doing. Keep bringing this stuff to us. Keep providing what you're doing. Keep giving your perspective, because it is a different perspective and it does
Mhm.
open up our mind to something different based on what you're seeing either in the data or with human intelligence in your analytical product, whatever the combination is. So I think it's a good takeaway too for people who are managing analysts, but also organizations with analysts, is to remember, let them have that time to be able to learn and make mistakes as well, because your organization is going to grow. Not only are they going to grow, but your organization is going to grow with those different perspectives.
Did the study differentiate between if there was a mass program or a big initiative for proactive policing that maybe the officers got assigned to, as opposed to individually being proactive? Did they mention anything like that?
Yeah, so this department had gone through some training on evidence-based practices and different proactive technique prior to, and basically it was more of a blanket department-wide training. The
Mhm.
department was pushing people in that direction and encouraging people to do that. They let time lapse between when they did that training and when they started surveying people for doing it. And I think that's one of the other reasons that the two of the findings related to the organizational structures, but not only that, also the resources, right?
Mhm.
Because most people in the department had just gone through that training. And so they felt like they had resources. Whether they wanted to do it was a different thing, but they had resources that they used. The other thing that was interesting about this, and I think it's a takeaway for analysts as well, is that when you look at any of these types of techniques, whether it's hotspots or it's proactive efforts in general, analysts can create really good analytical products that can help drive the organization towards these things, right? Or
Mhm.
support the organization in moving forward. And so it's really important that if you're an analyst and your organization says they want to go to these particular things, creating those analytical products that can really provide that guidance
Mhm.
is sometimes the resources that the officers need, that they
Yeah.
point back to and say that they want, that helps prepare them, right? So it's not just about training. Sometimes that analytical product is that resource. And that's something that is encouraging for analysts to be able to create really great things and have it be immediately used by their organization.
Yeah. At Cincinnati Police Department, we had a program. I think it was just starting and as I was leaving, so I'm not sure where it is now. But the idea was to create a hotspot and to create a CAD call to have officers go out during certain times of that we would expect the hotspot activity to occur. And again, it was a low level call. So if they had any kind of priority, they're doing the priority call. So it's not like they're getting pulled away from a mass attack or anything like that. But the spot was created. The time span was like, hey, just drive through here, be vigilant for this type of activity. This is the spot and this is the time of day where we're anticipating this activity.
Yeah, I've seen other departments do that as well. And really, one of the things that's really important about that is that you're putting it into people's process, right? You're not giving them some document over here and telling them to do it. It's right there in the CAD system. They can sign on to it if they want. They can actually do the work. It's right there in front of them. It's part of their business that's just natural for them. And I often say initiatives have to be fit into those things that are already what people are doing in their day-to-day work. If it's this thing over here on the side, it usually doesn't get done unless somebody really wants to do it, right? So that's definitely important.
My point to that is the data was analytical products. That was where we were seeing could get it narrowed down to both time and space. So I definitely think there's opportunities there for analysts to work with this type of environment and help out the officers.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple other takeaways for analysts too. Analysts tend to be that link between what the research is talking about more and more every day. We're seeing more and more analysts involved in the American Society of Evidence-Based Policing and being socialized in that world. And so I think it's really important that as analysts see this type of research, being able to say, hey, I can help create an analytical product if this is what you really want to do. And here's what the research says, and let me help that support. So more of that socialization from analysts, I think, is important. And then one of the things they did not talk about in here that I think is a huge reward system is evaluation, right? When you have analysts that actually take an initiative or take proactive policing in a particular area that people are doing, and they evaluate it and show that it had some sort of effect, that is a reward mechanism, right? It's telling the officers your work did X, Y, and Z. And we are bad about evaluation in policing unless it's some huge program with lots of federal money attached to it. We typically don't evaluate on a routine basis. And so analysts have the ability to help evaluate these efforts and give back that reward by saying, yeah, your work actually was potentially related to this crime reduction, or we're no longer seeing crime in this area about that particular type, whatever it might be. So I think that's another thing that, again, the study didn't talk about evaluation, but I think evaluation definitely is a reward, and analysts have a big role in helping to evaluate things effectively.
Yeah. You did mention promotion with the officer. And it gets me thinking along the lines of a path of an officer to executive leadership. And you're talking about those that, again, talked a little bit about the communication skill and the charisma, and then you're going to sprinkle in their education in there, and that exposes them to more research, more common topics that you're going to find with evidence-based policing and proactive policing. So
absolutely,
that doesn't surprise me. That's something that you would see from those that are looking to be in a leadership role at the police department.
Yeah, my experience as an analyst and then watching organizations adopt analysis, I see all the time people in the organization at various ranks, whether it's officer, sergeant, lieutenant, etc. The ones that use analysis more to help make their decisions on a day-to-day basis tend to get promoted faster because they're seen by their organization as somebody who is not thinking about the anecdotal story or not thinking about what we've always done. They're thinking about how does this data inform our approaches and how do we get better? They're often the ones that bring these new initiatives to light too. Hey, why don't I do this problem-oriented policing project in this particular hotel in my area, right? So I wasn't surprised about that either, because I think a lot of people realize if you're going down a path that is data informed and you're making better decisions at those lower ranks, you're going to get seen. Period. Even if you make mistakes, you're going to get seen for the initiative of doing that, because it's just not culturally what is traditionally done in policing. And we're starting to see the shift, but we're not there yet. Totally.
Yeah. We need somebody that is in both SWAT and proactive policing. So so they can show how cool it is, right?
That's right. I don't know. know. Maybe we'll get an agency to do some sort of cool PSA video on the behind the scenes. Oh, by the way, I do this on my SWAT call, but hey, by the way, I also go to these community meetings too, right?
Yeah,
We're seeing so much of that expose stuff now to get people from a recruiting standpoint. So it would be
yeah.
interesting to see that.
Yeah, because I was just thinking of the opposite. Because not of what is someone that's like, hey, someone that wants to get in SWAT. That's
Yeah,
they're focused on getting into SWAT.
yeah.
I would be guessing that they're not really paying too much attention about proactive policing if their lifelong goal is to be in SWAT. But I'm
Yeah, they're the arrest person, right? Like
yeah,
making
they're
all
the
those
door
crazy
kicker,
arrests.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the same, I get it, and it's a parallels with analysis too. That there's just people that, hey, I really enjoy being an investigative analyst. I enjoy helping, working on cases and assisting the investigation, and that's really my skill set, and that's really where I want to be, which is obviously very different from the proactive problem solving route.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the goal, though, is we're starting to see more and more agencies say to analysts, your skills are applicable across all of these things. And it's great for you to want to be an investigative analyst, and we're going to let you be an investigative analyst, but there are things that kind of cross over that you can do. Again, a little bit of a pilot project just to make you more well-rounded as an analyst, but also even the organization can use those skills in different ways. And I think there's a lot of merit to that from a professional development standpoint when somebody decides it's time for them to step outside of that agency and either go to another agency or move up and become supervisors of analysts. Having that broad range of skill is actually really valuable. But it's the same, I often say it mirrors policing, right? People who have that 20 different areas that they've been doing in their career is the one that tends to go to other departments and tends to be a good lateral. Now they were a sergeant in this agency and now they're a lieutenant or a captain over in this agency because they have a lot of broad experience.
Hey, Jamie, very good. This was great, very interesting. For the listeners, we'll put a link to the study in the show notes if you want to read the study and get into more information from the study. And as always, if there's a research topic that you want us to cover in this segment, please let us know. You can email me at leapodcasts@gmail.com. All right, Jamie, I'm going to give you the last word as we finish up. What do you want to end with?
Yes, I would just say that the opportunity for analysts to really help with these efforts is there. You can support your organization, you can provide research, you have lots of opportunities to help with these things. Dive into some of this research because it's applicable to your job and also can really help your organizations as you provide them good analytical products and make good decisions.
Very good. Thank you, and you be safe.
Thanks. All right, bye.
Thank you for making it to the end of another episode of Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. You can show your support by sharing this and other episodes found on our website at www.leapodcasts.com. If you have a topic you would like us to cover or have a suggestion for our next guest, please send us an email at leapodcasts@gmail.com. Till next time, analysts, keep talking.